Hi everyone, welcome to the Profile Training Certification Course Overview. This is the webinar number 2 going into more of the practical application. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And I just want to go over the schedule with you of what's going to be happening in this session, and then we're going to jump right into the content. We're going to, first of all, talk a little bit about finishing up what Antonia was talking about on the last session, the content specifically, and then go into a little bit more building upon that. So we'll do a quick review and then build upon that. And then Antonia and I are going to talk about the practical application of profiling, how a profiling session looks, hypothetical case studies, some actual case studies, just kind of a discussion for you. And then you can kind of see how you can see how we use profiling and how you can use profiling as well. And then after that, we're going to go into the info, the dates, the times, and all the details around the actual event. And then obviously opening up for question and answers. So if you have questions, get those ready because we'll have those at the end.
Yep. So no matter what we do, regardless of whether or not you're into profiler training, whether or not this is something that you're seriously thinking about, which we hope you are, but even if you're just curious and maybe joining us for the first time, we always want to be able to deliver some value to even people who are, who are just kind of showing up and checking out what's going on. So we really want to do basically finish up what we started last time when we went over the car model and some of those pieces, and we want to give you some really good information to go home with, or you probably are home, but to tuck yourself into bed at night with.
Maybe they're already in bed, who knows?
Maybe they are.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, please.
Before we do that, though, we've got a special guest on right now. His name is Scott James. And Scott, are you there?
Yeah, hey guys, how are you?
Hey.
Hey, Scott.
So Scott went through profiler training already.
Yes.
He's one of our former students.
Scott, do you remember which year you went through profiler training? I couldn't remember if you were 2012 or 2013.
I remember that it would have been 2.5 years ago.
Okay. So you were probably 2012.
I remember it was in May of 20, I think. Yeah,
okay.
Awesome. So take a moment, just let us know what was the experience like for you.
Oh, first, what personality type are you?
What type are you? That's right.
I am INFJ.
All right. And now...
Which would be Perspectives Harmony in the Genius System.
And so now, what was your experience? Like, what really was it like for you and your type to go through profiler training?
I thought it was awesome. Seriously, it was probably my favorite course that I've ever taken. But yeah, as someone who really likes insight about people, I just thought there was just so much good, amazing stuff that I learned that I use it all the time. But going through the course was just awesome.
So specifically, you're on our webinar, right? And you're going to say it's awesome because we got you on here because we know you think it's awesome. But specifically, what the experience of going through the lessons, is it? Is the information organized in a way that's digestible? Just give people, paint them a picture of what they can expect, at least from your experience going through some of the material.
Yeah, I thought it was very, really went in depth. I really looked for insight and information about this kind of stuff in a lot of other places, but I thought as far as like the real, I thought there's a real depth to the information, and I thought it was head and shoulders above anything else that I'd found.
Cool.
Now, you originally at the time, you do both. You actually run an online site called The Intuitive Musician, and then you also do web development and graphic design. If that's accurate, right? Is it both web development and graphic design, or is it just web development?
Yeah, a little bit of both. Yeah.
Okay. And we were talking about it earlier that you've actually ended up incorporating what you learned, the content that you learned, into both of your businesses. Can you flesh out how that looks for you?
Yeah, as far as the web design business goes, it's certainly helped me to get into better rapport with clients. It's helped me understand clients better, serve them better, and it's helped me get better testimonials from them as a result of that. And it's helped me understand things about myself, about how I should be allocating my time in my business, and it's definitely helped me make more money at it.
Wow.
Nice. And then an Intuitive Musician, which is would you call it a passion project or a love project? Because that's what it feels like for you.
Yeah, totally. That's kind of a side business that I've started that, where I take the stuff that I learned and kind of apply it to musicians.
And so when I go to Intuitive Musician, it seems clear that personality profiling is a massive part of that business. Can you sort of describe what you learned in profiler training and how you've been able to apply it to this new business that is a passion project for you and is a burgeoning actual business?
Yeah, so part of what we learned in the course was how to determine what someone's personality type is, even if we can't necessarily speak with them. So I do that with famous musicians, and then I'll post the insights about their personality type and how that relates to them as a musician, and hopefully that helps people to kind of get some insights for themselves.
Did that business emerge after? Were you already doing that before you took the Profiler Training Certification course, or was that an emergent of having gone through this stuff? So I'm unclear on the timeline.
That was totally an emergent. So as soon as, I think the last thing I posted in Profiler Training on the message board was that I just hit the launch button for that site. So.
Oh, cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I don't think I knew that it came from Profiler Training. So that's new information for me. That's cool.
I think I knew that, but I didn't want to assume it. I was like, I think I remember that I'm hitting the launch button in conversation.
Yeah.
So
I was totally fired up during the course to apply this to musicians because nobody's really done it before. So I thought, there's so much great insight to be had from applying this to different things that I was really pretty fired up about it.
One thing I've noticed about you, Scott, in kind of our conversations, and you're part of an inner circle community of people that have graduated and been certified because you're at pretty high level in this. So in talking with you, one of the things I've noticed is that you became obsessed with doing profiling early on in the midst of the course, and it seems like you've carried that obsession up till today, like this moment. Like you're still pretty obsessed. Like you're constantly profiling. You're eating, living, breathing, and sleeping this stuff, which we're not expecting everybody to do. But maybe give us a little bit of how it's impacted your life from just a day-to-day level. I don't know, in dating or friendships or I don't know, however
kind of like
you're
holistically.
relating. Yeah, holistically.
Yeah.
Is this giving you? And I'm putting you on the spot. I hate to do that, but is this giving you any kind of other benefits in life in general?
Oh, totally. Yeah. It's just embedded in the way that I think, and it's just had a transformative effect on, my relationships with people in my family and dating and just, so many different areas. It's just, I would, and obviously like we talked about in business, but yeah, it really is, and it's really awesome. It really does kind of give you superpowers sometimes, like when you meet someone and like, it just, I can't tell you how many times it's happened where they've just been blown away by something I just kind of intuitively knew about them because of the stuff that I learned at the course.
Cool.
So the question we were asking last week when we did the first version or incarnation of this overview was, we asked the people that we interviewed then, do you believe that it was worth your time and because it's a time and monetary or financial investment. Do you feel that it was worth both of those things for you? Do you feel like it was both a well-placed time and monetary investment for you?
There's no question. And, at the time when I signed up for the course, I wasn't expecting to. It was just kind of a last-minute thing, and I just kind of knew that I had this, I knew it was something I was really going to like, and I just kind of took a leap of faith, and I'm so glad I did.
That's awesome.
That's good.
Joel, you're Joel. Scott is part of our profiler community, which is kind of our inner sanctum. There are people who have gone through profiler training and then joined a community so that we can do continual, learning. And what's awesome is that Scott's gotten to a point where, he'll post things in the Facebook community and I'll understand them in a new way. So what I love about Scott is that he's gotten to a point of proficiency, just using it all the time, that we're now like learning from each other, which I think is fantastic. And I just really want to appreciate you, Scott, for not only coming on and giving us a great testimonial, but also being a part of that inner sanctum and, always supporting us through the community and supporting our learning by, kind of, you never let us rest on our laurels. So I just really want to thank you for both of those things.
Yeah.
It's always my pleasure. I absolutely love it, and I think you guys are great. So, thank you very much.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
We both did the namaste.
Yeah, we both did it. Namaste.
Whatever. Thanks, man. We really appreciate it. We'll talk to you real soon. Oh, you want to something?
Oh, well, the one thing that we asked people before was there anything else that we didn't go over? Was there anything that you wanted to say about profiler training that we didn't just cover through our our little Q&A?
I mean, I could probably ramble on about it for a long time, but I don't have anything in particular that stands out. But yeah, I mean, to anyone who's thinking about it, go for it for sure.
Okay.
Awesome.
All right, cool. All right, thank you again. All right, so we want to go straight from that, which is awesome. Thank you so much for an awesome testimonial, Scott. And we want to get into the content piece, because even if you're not considering going through profiler training, if you're just kind of curious about what this is all about, and maybe this is the first time you've ever interacted with us or watched us, we still want to be able to give you something to walk away with. And especially if you were here last week. Now, the content that we're going to talk about on this webinar is built on the foundation of what we talked about last week. So if you haven't watched the previous video, I highly recommend doing that. I mean, if you're watching it live right now, you'll have to wait until afterward. However, if you're watching this on the recording, please reference the first one in order to get a really good concept of what we're talking about in the content of this particular webinar. Now,
so let's go ahead and get right to it.
Let's go ahead and get right to it. So, as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about concepts that are built on the backbone of what we talked about before. And what we talked about before in the fundamentals of personality is that there are some primary influencers in every personality type. They're technically called cognitive functions, and that is one of the big pieces of what we dive really deep into in the Profiler Training Certification course. However, for the sake of this, we just kind of want to talk about a really easy way to understand how these influencers impact your life. And so we broke it down into a car model last time, and we focused on, well, we broke it down into 4 components, which are the driver, the co-pilot, the 10-year-old, and the 3-year-old. And in particular, last week we talked about the driver, the co-pilot, and the 10-year-old. Now, the driver and the co-pilot, they allow you to do 4 necessary components that everybody needs to be able to have, the 4 fundamentals of personality. And that is, they allow you to learn new information and also make decisions or evaluate that information in order to be able to make it useful to you. The driver and co-pilot also allow you to get in touch with your inner world and get outer world feedback, since one of them is going to be an introverted process and the other one is going to be an extroverted process. Now, it depends on your personality type where those all fall. However, those 2 processes give you all 4 of those things: the way to get in touch with your inner world and your outer world, and the way to make new or learn new information and to make decisions. And then we also talked about the 10-year-old and how the 10-year-old, well, we talked about how the 10-year-old and the 3-year-old processes are the mirror opposites of the driver and the co-pilot. And we called it, well, I'm not sure if we called it last week. I can't remember if we talked about what's called the cost of specialization. But the reason why these 2 are the mirror opposites of the driver and co-pilot is that when we are focused on one thing, we are by definition not seeing this stuff over here. So the 10-year-old and the 3-year-old process is the stuff in your peripheral. You're focused mainly on your driver and co-pilot, and the 10-year-old and 3-year-old just kind of come up and influence you in really subtle ways, oftentimes unconscious, in particular with the 3-year-old. So we talked about how the driver and co-pilot have their mirror opposites in the 10-year-old and the 3-year-old. And then last week, we primarily focused on the relationship between the driver, the co-pilot, and the 10-year-old. So we're our healthiest when the driver consults the co-pilot. That's what we learned last time, is that the co-pilot process is incredibly important because it rounds us out. Remember, the driver and co-pilot together give us an introverted and an extroverted process. But if we only stay in our driver, then we won't have access to one of those worlds. If we're an extrovert and our driver is extroverted, then if we don't use the co-pilot, we won't have access to the inner world. And that's the reverse if your driver is introverted. If your driver is introverted and you don't consult your co-pilot, then you won't have access to that outer world feedback. And the reason why we talked about the reason why we sometimes miss our co-pilot and go to the 10-year-old is that the 10-year-old is occupies that world that we love from our driver. So our driver and 10-year-old sometimes gang up on us. They gang up on the co-pilot. They make us really defensive. And so we talked about strategies for making sure that you stay out of your 10-year-old and make sure that you're in your co-pilot process. And you only consult the 10-year-old once you've already consulted your co-pilot. And then it will give you added wisdom. But if you go straight there, then actually you're acting like a big baby or a big 10-year-old. So we talked a little bit about that and the strategies behind it and making sure that you're optimizing your personality type by staying in your driver and your co-pilot, which is your source of genius. But the thing that we really wanted to talk about this week was we wanted to focus in on that 3-year-old process that we didn't even mention at all. Now, the 3-year-old process is the exact opposite of the driver process. All right. So just like the co-pilot and the 10-year-old are mirror opposites of each other, the driver and the 3-year-old are mirror opposites of each other. And what's interesting about the difference between the 3-year-old and the 10-year-old, even though they're both backseat passengers, is that the 10-year-old, at least on some level, is conscious for you. You have a conscious relationship with that part of who you are. It's a part that you kind of see inside of yourself, even though you might not think you're the best at it. It's still a part that you consciously go to or enjoy being in at times. It's a place where we do some R&R and have fun and relax and play or go to when we're being highly defensive. So there's a conscious relationship our brain has with the 10-year-old. The 3-year-old, on the other hand, is totally unconscious for us. Just like our driver could be called unconscious in its competence, we're so good at it, we don't even have to think about it anymore. The 3-year-old is unconscious in our incompetence in it. Like, we have no idea how bad we are at it. It's almost totally not on our radar how much of a stunted, infantile part of our personality this is. Now, you experience your world through the driver process. All right. So and that means everything in your life you're going to be experiencing through the first filter of your driver. You'll also experience stress in other places. If we go to our 10-year-old in a time of defense, obviously it's going to feel stress. The co-pilot will feel some stress, but the first point of entry for our personality is the driver process. So when we feel stressed, it's our driver that's taking the brunt of it. And the reason why we feel stress in our driver process is because it is not always the appropriate tool to solve every problem or challenge, but we really want it to be, right? Like, if we could, the world is filled with nails and we've got a hammer, so that's all we're doing, right? We're just like hitting things thinking that they're nails. Our driver wants to be the one tool we use to solve all problems. But it's not always the right tool for the job, which is why some people do things effortlessly because it is their driver is the right tool for the job. But we aren't doing it as effortlessly because it's not the right tool and we're still trying to use our driver as well. So the driver gets really stressed when it's trying to solve a problem and it is not the right tool for the job. The driver will become overtaxed, overexhausted, and then it gets burned out. So your brain knows that this mechanism happens, all right? Like it understands that the best way for you to deal with stress holistically is to break the activation of the driver process, all right? So if you can just get out of that driver, if you can just go to its opposite process, then maybe you could detox a little while and then the driver could get some R&R and chill out and maybe read a Cosmo mag or whatever and just not have to deal with life at all. And the opposite of your driver process, your brain knows the opposite of your driver process or the best way to get out of it is to turn on the 3-year-old, which is its opposite. All right. So what you're doing is you're shutting off your driver and you're going to your 3-year-old process. Now, it is incredible that the brain knows how to do this. Right? It is an amazing mechanism. It's an awesome self-preservation mechanism. But unfortunately, you're already stressed and burned out, and now you have a 3-year-old driving your car, right? Because it's like the driver passed out and the 3-year-old grabbed the wheel, and now it's trying to navigate the entire process, right? Or the entire world, the whole person, really. So you could see that this would be problematic. Most of the time that when this happens, these are the time periods when people say things like, I don't know why I just did that. I wasn't myself. Anytime you hear the phrase, I wasn't myself when I did that, you're usually talking about somebody in the 3-year-old and letting the 3-year-old drive. The reason for this is that we do not identify with our 3-year-old process. We are so over-identified with our driver that its mirror opposite does not feel like us at all. It does not feel like that is a part of who we are in the least. So when we behave in a way that has the 3-year-old leading, it feels like not us. And that's when we tend to do really crazy, stupid stuff, right? Like this is when we commit all of our sins or mistakes of commission and sometimes our mistakes of omission. This is when we make really bad decisions. This is when we're just trying to make something happen in order to not be stressed anymore. Now, it's a good mechanism, all right? It's a really great way that the brain has sort of inside of itself designed a way for you to detox. But the solution is not to let the 3-year-old drive. The solution is to stop the car, right? Like pull over, all right? Let the driver just chill. let the 3-year-old get out, and I always call it run around a tree for a little while. We have a 2.5-year-old. She's not quite 2.5, but she's almost 2.5. And most of the time, she just totally occupies herself in the back seat, right? She's just totally fine. But every other week, we actually do extended driving trips. And she hits a point of critical mass where she is not okay sitting anymore, right? Like, she's done, right? Like, I'm done being cool and sitting in my little cradled seat where I'm strapped in like a 5-point harness, right? And I can't move, and I'm done, right? I need to get out. So we as parents know that when that happens, we pull the car over, right? We let the 3-year-old get out, or our 2.5-year-old get out and run around for a while, just get some of her energy out. So that's the solution when you get super duper stressed, is that when your driver needs that rest, okay? It's not just the 3-year-old that needs to express itself, it's that the driver needs a break. And the brain is saying, if the 3-year-old expresses itself, you'll get that break, right? So the brain is actually forcing you to go to your 3-year-old. The brain's going, you need a break. You need to chill out. So the brain is forcing you into that process. And instead of fighting it or resisting it or pretending like that's not happening, the best course of action is to just let the whole thing happen, and you as a human being take a break from life for a little while. That means unplugging. That means taking some chill time. That means saying, hey, I'm really badly behaved right now, so even if I have like a deadline or whatever, this is the time that I need to go take a break, because I'm just going to make everything worse if I don't. And that's the solution. The solution is to let the 3-year-old express itself for a while, right? It usually doesn't take more than 20 or 30 minutes. That's my observation. My observation has been that if you stop the car and you let the 3-year-old run around for a little while, it usually does not take that long. Sometimes it takes a day. I've had it take 3 days. All right. I've had it be like, I need to detox for 3 days. But that's usually because I've been on the go for a month or two, maybe even more sometimes. So that mechanism is great. Honor it, appreciate it, understand it, and then let the 3-year-old do its thing. Now, if you've gotten the premium content, if you know what your Genius Style is and you've gotten the Genius Style assessment from the Genius Style assessment link on the Personality Hacker page or website, if you've gotten your assessment, this will all be broken down for your personality type. All right. So you'll know your driver, you'll know your 3-year-old. There are exercises or, not as many exercises for the 3-year-old. It's more like recommendations for detoxing and ways that you can honor your 3-year-old by expressing it, but in an age appropriate way, which is not handing the wheel of the car over to the 3-year-old, but rather letting it have some fun and just letting your driver chill.
And this is, in that premium content, this is what we're talking about when we talk about hacking your personality, finding the different leverage points. So that 3-year-old process, like Antonia said, in the premium content, there are recommendations for you to do, not exercises to grow it, but exercises to manage it in the midst of stress. So that's key. And I think that if you have that, obviously, if you download your premium profile, you'll see that in that profile.
Yeah. And that's, just to indicate, we're talking about profiler training here. All the content we talked about last week and this content, we talk about this in profiler training. What are the positions in each personality type? What does the 3-year-old look like in Joel's personality type versus, say, your personality type versus my personality type? Because we're all going to have our 3-year-old detox just a little different. And so knowing that information, just like Scott said, sometimes the insights he comes up with, people are like, how did you know that, right? Have you been stalking me and going through my garbage? Well, no, the answer is I know what your 3-year-old is. So I know how you behave badly and how you detox, right? So these are the kinds of things that make profiler training very powerful, not just for yourself and your own development, but also for helping other people diagnose what's going on for them and then giving them a prescription for how to optimize who they are.
It's a great coaching tool, or useful in your life with your relationships and family and all that.
Mm-hmm. So basically it means unplugging from the driver, going to the 3-year-old, letting it run around a tree for a while. And again, if you want to know what yours is, then please go download the premium content on the Genius Style assessment, if you have not already. All right, so let's talk about you at your best, all right? And I just want to go over a really quick overview of some of the other stuff that we talk about in profiler training, which is how do you identify not only somebody's personality type, how do you identify whether or not they're a healthy version, an average version, or an unhealthy version? And this, a lot of times, will trip people up when they're doing profiling. They'll see somebody who is a very healthy version of their type, and they'll think they're a different personality type because they're behaving odd, right? There's a bell curve of people who are very developed and very undeveloped, and everybody else falls in between. And we tend to imprint the everybody else in between part of the bell curve as certain typologies. And so when somebody's very developed or very undeveloped and they don't have the markers we're looking for, sometimes that kind of confuses us and throws us off. It's the same thing when we're typing ourselves. I've noticed some people have a really difficult time knowing what their type is because they're on the edge of that bell curve, right? They're on like one side or the other. And so it becomes difficult to even profile yourself. So what are some of the markers for what you look like when you're at your best? And what are some of the markers when you're not? All right. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. So each process, and so we're not just talking about personality type. We're talking about the process themselves, the process of the driver, the process of the co-pilot, the process of the 10-year-old, and the process of the 3-year-old. Each of them has 3 levels, 3 sort of gross overview levels of functionality. All right. So you can have one of your process be healthy and the other one be unhealthy. And then the relationship between the two will actually sort of lower down to the lowest common denominator. Meaning if you have a healthy driver and an unhealthy co-pilot, the relationship between the two of them is going to bring you down to unhealthy generally, or at the very best average. So it's not just a matter of knowing like your type and knowing your functions, right? And the people in your car. It's also knowing the health of each of these positions. And that's healthy, average, and unhealthy.
And another word for healthy you could use here is growth, like spending time exercising and growing those functions as well, utilizing them in a proactive, principled way that will grow them.
Yeah, and we talk about the difference between growth and usage, right? Exercising and using. We talked about this last time, actually, that there's a difference between, just having a golf ball and a golf club and kind of hitting the golf ball with a golf club. That's using those objects. However, when you put a 4 1/4 inch hole at the end of 200 yards and your goal is now to get the golf ball into that hole, right? That's actually exercising now. Now you're not just using these objects. Now you're actually exercising the process of getting the ball to the goal. And so now you're going to become better and better and more proficient. And each of these functions has a way to use them and a way to exercise them, right? And you can see in unhealthy people, they're using all their functions. They're using their driver. They're using their co-pilot. They're using their 10-year-old and their 3-year-old. They're using them, but they're not exercising them. And sometimes usage can be damaging. I mean, I'm using a golf club when I'm beating somebody with it, right? I'm using it, right? It's like, but that's not good, right? That's not creating win-wins in the world because unless the person's attacking me, then they had it coming. But if they're not attacking me and I'm bludgeoning them over the head with a golf club, that's using it, but is it exercising it for good, right? Is it a healthy expression? So that's what we're talking about when Joel says healthy can also be talking about growth. It can also be talking about exercising, not simply using. So what does healthy look like? Healthy looks like centered, confident, at peace with yourself, and honest. All right, so these are some of the markers you're looking for when somebody's truly healthy. They see life through the lens of giving value back. They receive feedback without defensiveness and become thoughtfully introspective. So it's not just a defense mechanism. Anytime you hear something that you don't want to hear, you automatically turn it off, or you deflect it, or you say, yeah, but you blah, 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 blah. You actually receive feedback. You hold space for it. You ask yourself if you agree or disagree, but you're thoughtful about it as opposed to just reflexive. Healthy people create interdependent relationships, and the functions themselves create interdependent relationships with each other as well. And so it's not just the person holistically, but it's also the processes themselves create interdependent relationships. And they come from a place of love, both for themselves and other people. They continue to grow, as Joel just mentioned. It's not just using, it's exercising. So you continue to grow. And you have a sense of perspective about failure, right? Like, it's okay if you fail. It's all going to be fine, right? Most failures don't lead to death. Most of them don't lead to mushroom clouds. So it's going to be okay if you fail. And so you're willing to take some risks. That's the healthy version. The average version is that you have some self-consciousness, but you learn to muscle through, right? Like, you're not going to let other people's feedback get you down, but you're still maybe a little bit sensitive to that feedback. And you might get pretty good at hiding self-doubt, right? You show up and you're like, well, no, I'm fine. I'm cool. Don't worry about it, right? And maybe some really intuitive people or maybe some really smart people that are not necessarily intuitive. I don't want to indicate that smart always goes with intuitive. Smart goes with smart. But some people who just kind of pick up what's going on, they're like, yeah, I think that person's actually faking it until they make it. But that said, you get good at faking it until you make it, and that's not a bad thing. You see through life through the lens of maintaining when you're average, and those are your functions as well. They're just trying to maintain. They're not trying to grow necessarily or get to the next precipice, but they're just there to maintain. And usually when you're average level of health, you do receive feedback defensively. You're usually not okay when somebody calls you on your BS, but you might later on kind of go, yeah, maybe I was kind of being a dick back there or whatever, right? Like maybe, I think they have a point. So you receive it defensively, but then you mull it over and it might actually lead to some authentic introspection. You create independent relationships. So an average person is not necessarily creating that interdependence, but actually creating independent, like I can do it on my own. I don't need anybody else, which is not necessarily a bad place to be in certain contexts. So that's usually the average level of health. And also you come from a place of trying to meet needs for loved ones. All right. So it's not like a global holistic, I'm trying to, help the world, but you are definitely taking care of the people in your life that you love. And the thing about average people and the reason why they're not super healthy is because they stop growing once they're comfortable. They reach a homeostatic level, and that's good enough for them. Now let's talk about the unhealthy versions of each of these functions. Unhealthy people are generally deeply insecure and they're dishonest with everyone, especially themselves, right? The whole cognitive dissonance things comes into play, and each of the functions themselves can be deeply insecure. You can watch somebody's insecurity manifested through their driver or manifested through their co-pilot, and in particular through their 10-year-old. You can really see that coming up. They see life through the lens of surviving. It's just about getting through the day and getting to the next day. And there is no reception of feedback. All right. They're at an unhealthy state or phase because they can't receive any feedback. They cannot allow themselves to ever think of themselves as right. What's the phrase? Would you rather
be right or happy?
Right. And usually when you're unhealthy, you would rather be right. Right. Like happy doesn't come into it. Yeah. So generally the person who's unhealthy uses stories to justify their beliefs, their feelings, and their rationale. Like it's basically one big sort of mental masturbation session inside where they're like, yeah, I'm going to feel this way and I'm not going to hear anything. And I just know that I'm right. And there's no sense of actually going out for happiness. And these types tend to create dependent relationships and worse, codependent relationships. That's usually a marker of unhealthy people. And our good friend Cameron defines codependence as it's an unspoken agreement that I won't call you on your BS if you don't call me on mine. Right? Like, nothing wrong here. We don't have to give each other any feedback that we don't want, and we are going to tacitly agree to that, and that's our unspoken rule, and that's a codependent relationship. So there's other definitions for codependence as well, but I always found that to be one of the most get to the point, pithy. Yeah. So that usually is seen in an unhealthy version, and you'll see that happening within the functions. The functions will create codependent relationships. That driver and 10-year-old, right? If you're going to your 10-year-old all the time, you have a massively codependent relationship between the two, which is the 10-year-old's not going to call the driver on any of its, BS, and the driver certainly won't call the 10-year-old. It's the co-pilot that has the dissenting voice. So even within the person, even within the personality, you'll see these codependent relationships coming up with the parts of their mind, like the codependent voices inside that are all telling each other, yeah, we're awesome, and we don't ever have to listen to anything that says that we're not awesome, including but not limited to how unhappy we are. Now, the person and the function that comes from an unhealthy place is generally hurting, and I don't know if you've heard the phrase, what is the phrase? Hurting people hurt people? Yeah, hurting people hurt others, basically. Yeah. And so it's a matter of now you see unhealthy people hurting others because they're actually in pain themselves. And they're totally stagnant. All right, they fear growth, they'll resist growth, they may lash out at situations that demand more and will retreat to comfortable environments even if they are abusive. So they will resist growth even if it would make them more comfortable in the long run. They have acclimated to very low levels of comfort, but as long as they're comfortable, right? Like their thermostat for happiness and comfort has been it's really low.
Calibrated low.
It's calibrated real low, and they'll run back to that comfortable place even if it's massively unhealthy and physically and emotionally painful. So that's generally the sign of unhealthy. And that's a big part of what we talk about in Profiler training too. Like, how do we make it so that we get these processes to a point where they're not unhealthy? How can you coach somebody understanding their processes and encourage them to go to the healthiest version of themselves?
Yeah. I think it's important to know that there's not a staticness to this as far as I resist a little bit calling somebody an unhealthy person. I think they're exhibiting unhealthy behavior, and their mental processes might be exhibiting unhealthy choices, decision, the way they learn. And as a person, they are not defined by one static label. I guess that's the thing that I have resistance to. And I'm not downing what you just said. I'm positing that to say that the whole point of this is to grow and use this as a growth tool.
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't disagree with that at all. I think it's an easy thing to say that somebody is holistically unhealthy. In reality, it's portions of them.
Yeah.
And if a person is at a pretty, like if their functions are a pretty low level of health, it's kind of hard to not see them as holistically unhealthy. However, I think your perspective is more useful because it gives a lot more room for growth, right? Like, it's not a static, you're unhealthy, so you're doomed. It's these parts of you are manifesting in unhealthy ways. How do we get them to manifest in healthy ways?
And the reason I say that is I've seen people use profiling as a weapon or as a negative categorization, and a lot of pushback for that. Like, well, you're an unhealthy person because I've identified you're needing to grow in this way, and this way, and this way, and that's not the useful way to use it. It's to use it to help somebody identify that, solicit it if they've asked you to, and then help them grow through that, or help yourself grow through that. So that's why I wanted to make that comment.
I think it was a good one to make. I'm glad you did. All right, so the questions are you pushing yourself to grow? All right, these are muscles that have to be exercised, not just used, right? And are you exercising them, right? Are you sharing your talents with others out of love in a healthy way? Are you humbly receiving feedback from the world? And are you thoughtfully forming your own beliefs, values, and identity? Are you doing that? Are you outsourcing those things to others? Or are you making sure that they're coming from within and you're resting into that? So where do we do that? Well, we do that in the driver and the co-pilot, right? You see those two little boxes? That's where all that good stuff comes, all right? Or are you, and are you showing patience for the less developed parts of yourself, all right? Are you caring for yourself like you would a child when you're in those backseat passengers, all right? So we talk about the 3-year-old and the 10-year-old. It's really, in Myers-Briggs terms, the cognitive functions in the back seat, right? These are called your tertiary and your inferior, all right? In what they call the cognitive function stack. This is your 3rd and your 4th placement. And the reason why I really like calling them the 10-year-old and the 3-year-old is because it gives this sense that we are caretakers for them, all right? They might be less sophisticated parts of who we are, but that doesn't mean, like, it's not like the 3-year-old and 10-year-old are, like, not valuable members of a family, right? You don't stuff them in the back of the car and lock it, right? Like, you caretake for them. So are you doing that for yourself? Are you giving them opportunities to play? Are you giving them opportunities for self-care? Are you gentle with who you are? And do you own when you're not, right? Or not as talented even? Are you owning where you are maybe not as good at something as somebody else is? That's called modesty, right? You own when you're good at something and you own when you're not so good. And are you okay with that? Like, do you have to be good at everything and all things to all people and therefore actually kind of bland at everything? Or are you really putting focus on your talents and then caretaking the parts of you that are less sophisticated and not as talented? Each one of these processes can be healthy, average, or unhealthy. And we're all stratified. All right. There are parts of me, like we were just talking about before, we've been really working a lot lately. And so when you work a lot, right, you tend to get stressed. You tend to have a lot of things on your plate. You're not sure how you're going to manage everything. And oftentimes that's when fights start or you start behaving badly because you haven't really been making sure that that you're doing any self-care or as much self-care as you need to. And as a person who lives and breathes this, I'm just absolutely sort of wonderfully flabbergasted by how badly behaved I can be, right? Like, I can just stomp around like a little kid and throw these temper tantrums. And I love it when Joel holds space for me because he's like, wow, that was something. And I just like freak out. And the same thing with Joel. Like, when he's at a point where he's just kind of freaking out, it's a matter of holding space. And then we'll both be freaking out together at the same time, which is, of course, lovely and wonderful when we can't hold space for each other. knowing how it shows up for us, though.
Yeah.
I mean, would you say that just knowing when we're going to our 10-year-old and 3-year-old, having language around it has just been massively helpful in any of our fights, any of the times that we need to make peace with each other?
Well, I'll call it on myself. I'll say, I think I'm actually going to my 10-year-old process right now. I think that's what's coming up for me. I think I need some expression here. I think I need some time to close some, for my process. My 10-year-old is a process we called effectiveness, which is the technical term is extroverted thinking, and it's about closing loops, getting things finished, accomplished, and done. And so if I haven't closed enough loops in the day and I'm freaking out, I call it. I say, I need to answer that email, do this other task. Then we can sit down and have this conversation. Before I do that, I just can't focus. And if I keep pushing myself this way, I'm going to probably explode in anger or frustration or in some other emotion that's not healthy for me. So knowing this language, I'll see what's happening in my personality and where my heart is, where my mind is, and I'll be able to call it and then adjust behavior in real time. So it's very powerful for me personally in that.
Well, and you're a feeler and I'm a thinker, right? You're an ENFP, I'm an ENTP. And so often, I mean, it's weird how many times that I call you and it immediately goes to voicemail because you're actually calling me at the exact same time. It is weird how how synchronistic we are in life because we're so similar, but we're totally dissimilar in that thinking and that feeling process. Yeah. So when I am emotionally overwhelmed because I'm a thinker and my emotions are not at the forefront, I do not have as much sophistication with interacting with them. When I'm just behaving badly emotionally, I need some time to go think, right? I need some time to try to figure out what's going on with me emotionally because it's not top of mind. Whereas you are a master at navigating your emotional space. So in early days, it looked like I was just walking out of the room. Like it looked like I was hanging up the phone and I didn't want to create any sort of positive interaction. And for you, you're like, why are you doing that? And what you learned is that I would always come back about 15 minutes later. I was like, okay, I thought about it. I think this is what's going on for me. And I think because we had language around it, you could say, okay, you're a thinker, so you have this emotional space that's my feeling part is my 10-year-old. So it's going to come out defensively and it's going to come out aggressively. And at the same time, I'm not managing it very well. So it was like, okay, I got to give her space so she can try to figure out and process through the emotional experience. Because if I stay in that moment, it just gets amped up. So it was just being able to have language around it. Let's pretend none of that's actually happening in reality. But for us in that moment, having language around it makes it so that we have a tool to navigate the situation, and at the end we're happy. We're in peace, harmony, happiness. So even if it's not empirically true, it doesn't matter. It's an amazing tool for navigating those spaces of what's going on with us.
I completely agree.
Yeah. So it's really important to make sure that you are navigating the space of all of these, the driver, the co-pilot, 10-year-old and 3-year-old, in a healthy way, in a thoughtful way, being able to sort of hold space for yourself, not sort of, fully hold space for yourself, and then hold space for other people when they're trying to navigate the passengers in their car. And again, we're all stratified. We're all at different levels of health. We're all at different points in our development, and we're all just doing the best we can. So this is a powerful tool for being able to hold space for people where they're at, and then identifying modestly where you're at and helping yourself get to the next level.
Absolutely.
So that's why we called this 2-part seminar, Know Thyself, Love Thyself. Know yourself, love yourself. That's the key to optimizing. And then once you've optimized, you've reached your full potential as an individual personality. So as the holistic personality that has all those parts, driver, co-pilot, 10-year-old, and 3-year-old, the holistic of you becomes a better version because you've got all these parts of you that are working in chorus with each other. They're all you're working to make them all at their best if possible. When you're not at your best, you can identify it and diagnose and then prescribe for yourself a healthier way of being. So we really believe that this is the best way to get to the happy place that you want to be, not just being right, but actually being happy.
Yeah.
All right, so that was that portion of the content. So we hope that was really helpful and useful for you. And if you showed up for that portion, then that's awesome. And we really hope that was of high value. What we're going to talk about now is what personality profiling looks like.
And I just want to make one more comment about what we just talked about.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I was
here we
go.
Not about the content, but about the framing of it. If a lot of what we just said resonated with you, and the Profiler Training Certification course is just a big time and financial investment right now, but you want to learn more about your specific personality, what we just went through over, I think it's 8 sessions in the Owner's Manual, it's called Your Personality, the Owner's Manual program, is a much less time and financial investment for you to go through personally for yourself and the relationships that are close to you to understand that more. And that's just an option if you're not ready for profiler training certification course yet, right now. What we're going to teach in profiler training certification course is not only that piece, so it applies to you personally in your intimate relationships, but then how to be able to do that for others. And we're going to be talking about this right now, how that looks to be able to sit down with someone and identify their personality type. And then basically, you can self-coach by understanding yours, but now learning theirs and helping them understand their personality is really what the profiler training certification course is all about.
Right.
It's about allowing you that superpower of sitting down with someone and identifying that for them. So we're going to riff, we're going to leave a very open format right now and discuss, kind of just an open discussion, a little bit about the methodology, the process of what it looks like to sit down with someone and do that. Now, there are 2 types of profiling that basically we teach. The first is passive profiling. And earlier in this session, Scott alluded to this. During the training, what we ask students to do is we ask them to go out and begin passive profiling. So you're watching people on television programs, you're just studying people in daily life, and you're starting to make determinations based on the behavior they're exhibiting or the things they're saying and the way they're acting on a type guess. What type do you think they might be? And identifying that. And we'll show you how to do that. And that's the first stage, is kind of that understanding of personality. But the deep dive piece is being able to sit down in an interview format with someone. So they've agreed to be profiled. They're either sitting across the table from you or on the phone or Skype, and you're asking them questions. And we have a whole methodology and a set of questions that will teach you how to ask that will give you insight into how their mind is working. Again, it's not behavior-based. It's more about how their mind is learning information and making decisions.
Yeah, and so the 2 components of active and passive profiling. Passive profiling is to get your feet wet. It's to help you sort of understand, and sometimes extremely useful. If you're in a business context where you can't actually sit down and ask people a bunch of questions, then passive profiling is what you need to do. You need to kind of quickly assess, or, over time, maybe you ask them some questions on the sly, and you get them to, give you an insight into their mind, and you only need a little bit of information when all of a sudden you understand the entire picture, like Scott was mentioning with his clients, right? He's gotten more money, better testimonials. We use it to vet our customers as well, knowing, especially if we can see what level of health they're at and what their motivations are. It's really helpful to be able to determine what kind of person you want to work with, right? Yeah. So that you get in good win-win relationships. So the passive profiling piece is really important. I don't want to diminish
employees.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of stuff. I don't want to diminish that at all. But the active profiling piece is generally a lot more powerful, because then you get the opportunity to sit down with somebody and break it down for them. And that can be life-changing. Those are the times that you hear things like, I feel like you're reading my palm. I feel like somebody just read my mind. I've never felt so understood. People will burst into tears. I've had that happen on a number of occasions. People just start crying on me. And, I'm like, and I get it. I get why, because especially if you're one of the personality types that feels misunderstood most of your life, right? If you feel profoundly misunderstood, having somebody go, I don't even need to know your name, just answer a couple questions, and now suddenly I know things that even your most intimate relationships don't know, right? It feels a little weird, but at the same time, it gives people hope that they can be understood, right? It gives them permission to be themselves. You get permission to be yourself, and that permission piece is massively freeing. And I've known people who have gone through profiler training that one of the things it did for them is it helped them figure out what it is that they wanted to do on the planet, right? Because they got to a point where it was no longer unmanageable. Now they understood a language for understanding patterns of how people operate and work, and that gave them permission to continue to pursue other sort of softwares of pattern recognition and figuring out what it is that they want to do on a big scale, because now they have the superpower to bring to the world, kind of like Scott with Intuitive Musician. Yeah. So it can be a game changer. All right. That's when we get testimonials. Most of the times we hear phrases like game changer, life changer, changed how I thought, changed my mind, changed the wiring of how I thought. Now I think about it all the time. Like, it's a powerful way to reframe your relationship with reality, honestly. And that's why we feel it's such important content and information.
So profiler training, the actual training itself, is split into 2 major sections. The first section is going to go into the system, the granular, nitpicky details of the system. We'll break down every single cognitive function, go deep dive into all of that, break down the dichotomies, which is that 4-letter code. So if you're an INFJ, for example, that 4-letter code, we call those the dichotomies. We'll break the system down into all of its parts so you can see it from all the different angles, hold it as a 3-dimensional model, and learn the system at a full level. And then the second part is where we go into the methodology of taking the system you just learned and applying it to real-world examples, applying it in real-world scenarios. And one of those real-world scenarios, the main thing that we focus on, is the profiling session, the session of sitting down with someone. And the profiling session can be split into several parts, and then we'll kind of go into these parts. But overview, there's like basic parts here are you ask the person several questions, a set of questions, and you have a conversation with them, determine what you believe their type is. You explain their type fully to them, and then if you want to, we will also show you how to then begin to coach them through their personality as well. So there's these kind of these movements through this profiling session. I don't know if you want to add anything to that overarching framework before we get into the details of how that session looks. But.
No, and basically when we go through the session or the portion that is the system itself, it's broken up into a few modules. Joel mentioned some of the technical names. We talk about what's called dichotomies. Yeah. We talk about what's called cognitive functions. There's some proprietary content, like some serious proprietary content that we've discovered that we call the polarities. And they're very powerful, understanding the polarities. And so we do a deep dive. We also talk about Keynesian temperaments, and we just really do like a super deep dive into what the etymology of all of this is, not just sort of information that can be found everywhere. It's actually like what's going on behind the curtain of all of this content and information. And that way you get the most accurate information possible. A lot of people feel that they're fantastic at passive profiling, and once you go through profiler training, almost every single person who's gone through profiler training gives me feedback that they go online to see people's celebrity type guesses, and it drives them up the wall because they know that they're so wrong. Like, how could you say this person is this type? How could you say, you know, this person's an ENTJ? They're very clearly an INFP, right? So it's those kinds of things that you become really proficient at. And then the application of it is that part where you start to understand, okay, how are these different personality types? Now you understand the dichotomies, you understand the temperaments, you understand the cognitive functions, the polarities. How do you take a sort of, you create a Venn diagram of all these things that when they meet in the middle, that's the person's type. All right. And so you do what we call triading. Although there's more than 3 parts now, we've officially added other parts. So you pull from this portion of the system and this portion of the system and this portion of the system and this portion to be able to get the most accurate type guess possible. And then the second portion, which is the application, also goes into a couple different modules on health, on, you know, how to make it so that people really understand what their type breakdown is, how to make it accessible to other people, how to make it so that you can navigate around these types in the best way that, you know, like meeting people halfway, giving yourself permission to be your type, and then unconsciously giving them permission to be their type, that sort of thing. So those 2 modules those 2 sections are also broken into different modules where we do a super deep dive and then get to the application portion.
Yeah.
Did I go deeper than you wanted me to go deeper?
No. Okay. Fantastic. All right. The more information for you to make a decision, the better. Right. So let's go right into the profiling session. So again, this is an active conversational profiling session is what we're talking about here. Right. And this is what, at the end of the course, you will be able to do. If you put the time and the effort into learning all of this, this is the emergent of going through the course. This is what we hope you are able to do at the end of the course, having done all the work. That's what we're working toward. So, sitting down with someone, what we're looking for, just to kind of couple key markers, we're going to be asking questions, and we're looking, obviously, for answers to those questions. So we're looking for the things that people answer and what they say. We're looking for the things they say between the questions. We're looking for the things they don't say. Mm-hmm. We're looking for confusions. So anytime they're confused, that's a key piece of information based on potential personality types. So we're watching all these things. Watching things like body language, facial expression, voice tonality. We're looking at all the different nuances of how the person is interacting with us in this conversation. And from that, like she's talking about, we're going to be creating that Venn diagram and that triading ability to get to the closest approximation, or what we consider the best fit type, the best thing that we can come up with, what that type is. And we believe that you'll be very accurate at this if you put the time in and practice this using the methodologies that we've developed.
One of the most powerful questions that we use and I start every profiling session out with this particular question. We're going to spend, last profiler trainings, the last couple that we taught, we spent an entire session on this question. And it's one of the most powerful questions that you can ask somebody. And that question is, what is it that you love to do? And then I always add, when I say what do you love to do, I mean, what do you love to do so much, the only reason you stop is because you're exhausted. Otherwise, you'd go on indefinitely. That one question will reveal so much about a person, how they're wired, how they see themselves, how they get their energy, which of course is generally a full description of their driver process. When you get a full description of their driver process, you need 3 of the dichotomies, right? So there's 4 dichotomies. I'm an ENTP. My driver process represents 3 of those dichotomies. So if I can get somebody to accurately give me a description of their driver process, I've already got 3 of the 4 dichotomies down. And from there, you go to what we call low-hanging fruit, all right? So is it really obvious that they're an introvert or an extrovert? Is it really obvious that they're a thinker or a feeler? Is it really obvious that they're using a specific cognitive function? Is it really obvious that they're very much in a certain polarity? Is it obvious what temperament they are? So you're looking for all the obvious markers, and then you grab that low-hanging fruit. And then once you've got certain parts of the low-hanging fruit, then you have a full dichotomy set, and then you ask yourself, but does it make sense that they're using what's in the car, right? Does it make sense that their cognitive functions are coming out? So is my type accurate or not? And then you kind of pursue a little bit more. So it's really a matter of, like Joel said, letting them tell you what their type is. You follow down whatever road they take you down, picking up that low-hanging fruit as you go. And then you direct the conversation towards other ways, and you get to a point where in not very long at all. Now, there are some people who are tough nuts to crack. And like I said, there's a bell curve. Some people are super developed. Some people are super undeveloped. And then, of course, you got people close to the edge of the bell curve. It's taken me, there have been people, having done this for a long time, there have been people who have taken me 45 minutes to an hour to figure out what their type is, which is really interesting because that doesn't mean, like, there's no promise that you're going to get it in 10 minutes, right? There's no promise of that because some people are truly at a point where, because of their influences, because of the things that they're dealing with in life, somebody can be massively depressed and not reveal that information to you, and they're spending a ton of time in their 3-year-old process, and you don't know that, so you're really thrown off. There are a lot of different components and influences that come in. However, I don't think anybody's lasted more than an hour for me. And so at the hour mark, you've got a full, basically diagnostic on what's going on with this person. If they are massively depressed in their 3-year-old, what's the best thing you can tell them? Start getting in your driver. Why aren't you in your driver process, right? And the person's like, and then they'll name some narrative or story why they do not have any permission to be in their driver. And you can immediately go, look, these are the ways you get in your driver. Here's how you use it. Here's how you exercise it. Here's how you can recoup your energy. And I've actually had people literally get out of a depression because they figured out what their driver was and allowed themselves to get into that driver process.
Yeah.
We did a podcast. Personality Hacker did a podcast on one of our very good friends, Dan, who was literally, and I know this sounds sensationalist, and this is one of the reasons why we interviewed him, he was literally at the brink of suicide. He was actually contemplating suicide. And then he asked himself, because he had some familiarity with what we did, what we do, and he went through profiler training, and he went through through our program Intuitive Awakening, and he asked himself, before I kill myself, how do I get into my driver process? He actually asked himself that. And he's an INFP, so he got more into authenticity, and he allowed himself to do the hard work, right? It wasn't just a button, it wasn't just a pill to take, but he actually allowed himself the permission to be in authenticity. And at this point, he's got a very enviable life that I'm forever envying, because he's traveling all over the world without kids.
And it gave him a roadmap of where to put his attention of growth,
right,
to get out of the funk he was in.
Yeah.
So let me. Can I? Do you have?
No, please.
As an example, if we ask this question to somebody, so we asked this question to a person a few months ago, and what do you love to do that you lose yourself in? You spend so much time, you almost have to be stopped by someone else, either by time constraints. Someone else, your wife walks in the room and says, you gotta stop doing your activity here. You gotta come with the whatever. What do you do that you just can't quit? You love it. You get in flow. And the person answered, I love going to the gym. I love it. I love going, and I love feeling my body. I love lifting weights. I love getting that expression of my body. It feels so good to be there. And that's a key piece of information for us. That means that they are a person who, if this is where they feel in flow most of the time, they're going to be somebody that likes to be in their body. And that starts to tell us a key indicator of what personality type they probably are. That seems obvious, right? But what we're looking for in this, as Antonia said, is not only the dichotomies, but we're looking for those cognitive functions. That's the technical term of how your mind is learning information and making decisions. And that driver process is a cognitive function that we're trying to identify. And oftentimes in that initial question, for example, the person will reveal their driver process to you without even thinking about it, because they unconsciously are using this all the time. And so after talking with this person, we ended up understanding about them through a few more questions to verify what our initial conclusions were, that they were leading with a process that we call sensation, which is an extroverted sensing process. So that's the technical term, but it means to basically be in your senses. You're a sensual person that likes to feel, touch, be interacting with your world at a sensual level with your senses, not just your five senses, but the other senses you have as well. And that question opened that dialogue up in that discussion for us in the profiling session to be able to identify that for that person.
And when you are at a point where you now know the person, I mean, they're basically revealing to you their cognitive functions, oftentimes most people utilize it in some specific application, and we have utilized it in particular, very high leverage. Well, in relationship coaching, we've used it a lot. I use it in personal coaching when I do what we call BHAG coaching, which is big, hairy, audacious goal. What is it that you're on the planet to do? How do we utilize your personality and optimize it to get there? But the one thing that we've really noticed that it's super helpful is in business and team building. Mm-hmm. We have seen so many situations where a personality type will, especially if they're, well, not especially, when they are the person who hires. When we run into somebody of our personality type, we just like them, right? Like there's just something, we just like the cut of their jib. Like there's just something about them that we like. And we will have a tendency to hire that same personality type over and over and over again. So you'll get whole teams of the same personality type and massive blind spots, right? Because everybody's sharing the same 3-year-old process or the same 10-year-old. And so just complete and total blind spots. So when you can accurately personality profile, like say a team, then you can say, look, this is the reason why your clients are asking for something that you're simply not providing for them, right? Like we did that when we consulted with Zappos. We discovered that there was a question that their clients had that the team that was responsible for answering it was unable to answer because it's just not how they thought. And almost all of them were the same personality type. So we've seen that happen over and over and over again. And so when you have this ability, you now can put it into, because we all start with ourselves, right? We're all traveling the planet with ourselves. It has the practical application for personal development, like we just talked about. Obviously for relationships, like we talked about with our relationship, for figuring out what you want to do in the world, and then also a very strong application in business. And I know quite a few people who are using it specifically for business coaching. So profiling looks like an interactive conversation with another person and getting them through questions to reveal how their mind is wired. And then once you have that solid, accurate assessment of how their brain is wired, then being able to diagnose and prescribe some major leverage points, some major tweaks in order to get them to a better place in personal life, relationships, in figuring out what they want to do on the planet, and then in business. So there's a lot of different applications.
Yeah. And it's fairly sophisticated when you get down to the level that we get down to, where we're talking, again, I hark on this a lot, we're talking about the way the mind actually works, the way the mind learns information, the way the mind makes decisions. Because you'll see behaviors exhibit themselves. And oftentimes I think when people are starting out, I know when we've started out, we've looked at behaviors often, and we tried to almost retrofit or deconstruct someone's personality based on their behaviors. But again, like Antonia said, it depends on the health, it depends on a lot of factors, it depends on where they are in life, how old they are, how mature, how aware they are as a person, how those behaviors manifest themselves. And so what we're really doing is we're trying to peel back the layer of behavior, and we're trying to get down into how the mental processes work, because we believe that the more accurate typing happens at that level. And when you're down at that level, you have the ability to understand how things are actually working in their brain, and then personality hacker, we have hacks for all the different things that might be coming up for the different functions that different personalities are using.
Right. Yeah.
I'm done. That's all I want to say.
And so do you have anything else that you want to say on what personality profiling actually is or how it can be applied?
I think that's good. I think if people have questions, if you have questions, get ready for them because we're just going to go into those in a moment here. And we can unpack more of that if you have a little bit more nuance to it. Again, we could keep going down this road, but unless you know the inner workings of the system, it's not going to be as useful to you until you would go through the profiler training program.
Right.
And then it would be massively useful. So I think we gave people enough to give them an idea of how this looks. Oh, I'll just say this. It often looks like you're typically sitting down with someone. I've done it in restaurants. We've done it in business contexts. You'll have usually a notepad. You'll be taking some notes as they're going, and then you'll actually be able to draw out that car model for them in real time and show them their personality. And we'll even give you a methodology for that, how to explain this to someone else. Because it's one thing to know something, the system. It's another thing to be able to profile someone and then be able to regurgitate that back and to show them their personality. That's a whole nother skill level. And we'll teach you that in profiler training as well, how to be able to explain it to them in a way that's easy for them to digest because they haven't been through profiler training like you have. So they're going to need you to break it down in very simple terms for them, and we'll show you the exact methodology we use to do that.
Right. To make it as accessible as possible, to make it as useful as possible. All right, so let's talk about the profiler training certification course. So we've talked about, so we've gotten testimonials last week. This week we got testimonials from people, and there's a certain segment of the population that clearly loves it. We talked about some really good content, the kinds of things that we'll be addressing in profiler training, and we talked about what a personality profiling session looks like. But let's go ahead and talk about profiler training again for those of you who missed it last week. So it's a 25+ session course, which means that there's going to be bonuses available. We're going to add things onto it. Right now, we've got a 5-day course of 5 sessions per day. So it looks like it's going to be 25 sessions, but it could actually end up being more because we're perceivers and we're a little flexible. And then we always, whenever we find something that's awesome and that we really want you to be, to be aware of, we always tack it on as a bonus. It covers those 4 fundamental aspects of personality. It dives deep into the 8 genius styles or cognitive functions. We also talk about the dichotomies. We talk about the 16 personality types. We talk about the polarities. These all are like $5 words that actually have specific technical meaning, and you will master all of them. You will know what they mean, and you will understand how that they're applied in the real world. And as Joel was mentioning, it sets you up with a live profiling session, so you get hands-on training while you learn. There's exercises. There are all sorts of ways that you won't just sort of be consuming information, but you'll actually be performing it. And because you perform it, then of course it gets into your muscle memory and you get better and better at it. And then upon completion of assignments, you become eligible to be certified as a personality profiler in the Genius system. So there's certification that is a possibility. Not everybody gets certified. You have to go through a certification process at the end of it. There are some people who weren't really interested in that. They just wanted to get the information and apply it. And some people wanted to be certified. And there's some cool stuff that comes along with certification. So that's you become eligible for that certification once you complete the all of the things that you need to do to qualify for certification. So the modules cover, as we mentioned, 4 dichotomies, 8 cognitive functions, the 16 Myers-Briggs types, the 4 temperaments, the 4 polarities, the defensive strategies for every type, and accurate live and passive profiling. These are go at your own pace trainings. So even though we're going to be doing them in 5 days, 5 sessions per day, they really, I would love for people to be able to consume them live. I think that data dump is actually healthy. I think you retain stuff that you don't even realize you retained. I've gone through training programs that are like this, and I come away with my brain spongy and bruised, but filled with information that I just saw myself just start to unconsciously apply. So if you can make it there live for all 5 days, that is amazing. However, we've had people that have taken up to 2 to 3 years to become certified, which means that they consume the content very slowly. And that was their pace, right? That's what they wanted to do. And so we wanted to make it so that no matter how fast or how slow you learn, we can set you up with either. And even if you're not able to make it there, even if you consume content slowly and you don't want to be there for all 5 days and consume it immediately, we are very tied into and supportive of our profiler training students. This is a massive time investment. It's a massive financial investment. It is a big deal, right? We don't want to diminish that. And at the same time, it's profound and life altering, right? Which is the point. So we want to be very in touch with you. We want to be there for answering questions. We want to be accessible. We want to dialogue with you. So it doesn't matter how quick or how fast or how slow you consume the content. We're there with you every step of the way.
And quite frankly, we're investing in you. And I said this on the last webinar. We feel like you are going to be a part of us when you take this. And so we're spending the time to invest in you. And we're hoping that you take it serious when you sign up, because we want to be there to support that investment. And again, there's no promises, but I always mention this, that as Personality Hacker grows and as we expand, I can see the day coming when we're going to need to rely upon the people who have been properly trained through profiler training for coaching situations, potentially clients, feeding different types of work to people that would like to be in that place. And so again, that's down the road, but that's just something that we have in the back of our minds as we begin to develop profiler training students, that this is a possibility in the future. So again, we've considered an investment, and we've actually asked people not to take the course because we do feel we're investing in certain people that we felt like it wouldn't have been a good fit for both sides, because it needs to be investment on our side too.
Yeah, absolutely. Not that we turn people away, like be gone, right? It's more that when we know that it's too much for them to handle at the time, I've recommended that they take it at another time.
Yeah.
And so we just really want to make sure that we're not setting you up with something that you don't end up implementing.
Yeah.
This is part of our mission, all right? This is not just a business for us. This is a part of our mission. And so making sure that people have the ability to get high value from the content and then are able to apply it to their lives, that's a big part of basically who we are and what we want to do. So it's important to us that we invest in you and you invest in the content. All right. So tuition is $19.97. We can split it into a payment plan that matches your budget. Now, for some people, that's no problem at all. We've got plenty of people who are like, where do I write the check? And we have some people who really want to take the course, but that's not something that they can afford right now. And so we want to work with you. We understand that this is an investment. A lot of times it's a business investment for people. And we recognize that a business investment or even a personal investment may need some flexibility. So we are very flexible on the payment plans.
If you know this is something you want to do and you're ready to do it, if you go to profilertraining.com, there is a place there to sign up right now and join us for the Profiler Training Certification course. We would love to have you as a student. We'd love to have you be a part of this program and join us with this, whether it's the live, the whole thing, part of it, or watching recordings. We want you to be part of Profiler Training if you feel like this is a great fit for you. So profilertraining.com is how you can sign up. Oh, and the other thing is the format's going to be basically what you see here.
Right.
Slide, you'll see us on video, taking turns teaching some content. And Tony's going to do most of the heavy lifting of the technical pieces, the technical content teaching. I'll be coming on for some color commentary and production. And that's the way we can get through the material. If there's two people teaching, sometimes it slows the process down. So we're going to have one person doing a lot of the technical teaching to get through the content in a very efficient manner, so you can really spend the time on exercises and digesting it rather than hearing two people trying to teach it. And we think that's going to be a much more effective way to go. So this is the way the format will look. You'll be able to join live just like this, see us on camera, see the slides, and be able to interact with the material that way.
Yeah. So again, please feel free, if you need some time to post-process and try to figure it out on your own, or if you're watching the recording, please feel free to send us questions at info@personalityhacker.com, and we'll do our best to answer as many questions as you have as comprehensively as we can.
So if you are ready to join us for the Profiler Training Certification course, seems like a fit for you, you'd like to be part of this, head over to profilertraining.com, and that's a place where you can sign up and be a part of the Profiler Training Certification course.
And if you have any questions, please, again, feel free to shoot us those questions at info@personalityhacker.com. So we want to really thank you very much for showing up tonight as we went over making the most of your personality part 2, and for sticking with us while we talk about the Profiler Training Certification course. And we really hope that we've been able to give you some value tonight. We really hope we've been able to answer a lot of your pressing questions. And we really hope that you're strongly considering or have already decided to join us us, because it really is some pretty powerful life-altering material, especially when you invest in it. So it's an investment in yourself, and we want to invest in you, and we want people to be able to take the power of the system and be able to apply it to their lives to increase their own personal satisfaction and happiness, and for others. So we really want to thank you very much for joining us tonight on this call of making the most of your personality and what goes into Profiler training.
Thank you very much for being with us.